this room is our War Between the States room. It was one of the first rooms filled in this museum in 1988. Captain James Tyree Wright, Chapter Number 6, Military Order of Stars and Bars, and the General Joe Shelby Camp, Number 1414, Sons of Confederate Veterans, were responsible in filling the room with artifacts. This room has Southern military history, artifacts, memorabilia, and photos honoring Confederate figures. There are images of Generals Robert E. Lee of Virginia and Joe Shelby of Missouri. Now here we have 3 busts of General Robert E. Lee, and they were dedicated to 3 young men who were members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. They lost their lives in the Middle East. Navy SEAL Master Chief Tommy Ratcliffe of Green Forest, Second Lieutenant James Michael Goins of Green Forest, and Sergeant William W. Billy Bushnell of Jasper. Ratcliffe, a reenactor known for his authenticity in portraying Confederate soldiers, and the other 2 men had a strong love for history. A memorial dinner was held, and these busts were presented to their families in their honor and for their service. Now, the Leslie Breeding Confederate Memorial Library was established for Leslie Breeding because of his financial commitment to this library for the war between the states. This library contains many books on the war between the states and other local histories. It also includes a collection of Southern Historical Society books, Civil War official records, local histories, and some media formats on VHS tapes and, of course, CD. Items like bullets, buttons, grape shot, and historical clothing add personal significance. Now, this room contains charters for the Sons of Confederate Veterans, which was established locally on June 7, 1983, and the Military Order of Stars and Bars charter was established locally on November the 4th, 1983. Other prominent figures commemorated are General Robert E. Lee and Jesse James. Now, Jesse James' connection to Boone County after the war between the states is noted for a notorious incident in Boone County in which he killed one of his former gang members, who he thought had betrayed him. There are photos of Confederate leaders, President Jefferson Davis, and General Sterling Price of Missouri. Now, Price commanded troops from Boone and Carroll counties in Arkansas. Additionally, a display case features bullets personally collected in Sedalia, Missouri in 1996 by J. Troy Massey and Keith Deline. This display includes various artifacts such as bullets, Yankee buttons from Jenkins Ferry, and grape shot from the 1864 Battle of Pilot Knob, Missouri. This historical clothing is also featured, including a floor-length dress and bonnet from the 1850s and 60s. Now, this was usually worn for church and special occasions. Joanne O'Neill Massey donated her great-grandmother, Virginia, they called her Jenny, Wright Horton's embroidered dress, which was preserved from the Civil War era. Additional items include a needle from the Civil War period, a button hook for fastening ladies' shoes, and a reproduction of lace from that era. This collection includes a booklet from the 11th Annual Convention of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which was held in October 1906 in Marianna, Arkansas. We see here a photograph of Seaborn Jones. He was a member of Harold's Arkansas Cavalry Battalion, Confederate States of America, along with his wife, the picture is here, along with his wife, Mary Wilburn Jones. Here we see a banner from the now defunct Jeremiah H. Brooks chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which was based in Harrison, which is now inactive. The museum features a display of Confederate and Union soldier uniforms and their equipment. These were all funded by a grant from the Arkansas Civil War Sesquicentennial Commission. The display includes a uniform, belt buckles, shoes and caps, a tent, a blanket, a cot, a canteen, a haversack, and lanterns showcasing the soldiers' camp life. The Confederate uniform is gray, of course, while the Union uniform is blue. Now, additional canopies, jackets, and children's bonnets allow young visitors to dress up and to make photos or to have photos made here with this apparel on. Of course, having to do with the Civil War. Another display includes a post-war Confederate veteran's gray jacket, once worn by William Anderson Lowry. You will notice in the corner a very nice picture of General Robert E. Lee as he's reading his Bible to a little child. He was truly the Confederate Christian general. These three large pots or kettles were transported to the Boxley Valley on the Buffalo River. Now, one of the kettles was from the Scoggins family, who had this kettle in their possession since the war ended in 1865, and it came to us through the Jim Valines family. The other kettles were donated from the Beth Melton and Amos Massey families. The kettles had been used in Louisiana to boil sorghum or molasses and brought up from Louisiana prior to the war in 1861. The kettles were used at the Bat Cave at Boxley, now listen to this, to boil the bat dung and saltpeter in the caves along the river. Now, by weight, the ideal ratio of these substances would be 75% potassium nitrate or saltpeter and 15% softwood charcoal and 10% sulfur. On January the 9th through the 12th, 1863, Union Captain Caldwell traveled over to the Bat Cave in Boxley and destroyed all the buildings and kettles used in the making of gunpowder. All of the Confederates working in the cave, of course, were taken prisoner and removed from the area. Now, this photo is of the Melton family showing Beth and Roger playing in one of the kettles that had been in their family for a long, long time. These are some Confederate notes and bonds that have been purchased during the war. Well, the purchaser could be paid interest on the bond annually. But after 1865 and the war's end, the Confederate notes and bonds, of course, were of no value. Today, of course, they are of value for this historical novelty in this museum. This United States flag was the flag that our Congressman John Paul Hammersmith gave to our camp. The flag flew over the U.S. Capitol on May 30th, 1988, and was given to the General Joe Shelby Camp number 1414 Sons of Confederate Veterans, which is located, of course, here in Harrison, Arkansas. The next picture is of General Morris David Vance, who was commander of the United Confederate Veterans in 1938. He met with President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1938 at the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. Commander Vance, as you'll see, is outside of the vehicle, and President Roosevelt is seated inside. This is, as you can recognize, a Confederate original $10 bill, which was used by the Confederacy during the war between the states. Then we have Martin Mortimer Heath, who was a Confederate soldier. We have his footlocker, which was actually used. The Confederate cavalry jacket is a reproduction of one that would have been worn during the war. Next is a McClellan saddle from John Sutton of Ava, Missouri. It was named after a Union general, McClellan, but actually had been a saddle that had been in use for several years by European countries. Here are cannonballs fired from Yankee ships at southern ports in Grand Gulf, Mississippi. And then, of course, this telescope, which would have been used during the Civil War or the War between the states. This is a blue and gray 1895 reunion program and United Confederate Veteran Reunion medals from reunions in 1928 in Arkansas, 1936 in Louisiana, 1938 in Gettysburg, and the Confederate Southern Cross of Honor. Next is a porcelain plate, and it's a depiction of the first White House of the Confederacy in Montgomery, Alabama. Now, the bottom item is a wagon hub which came from the Samuel A. Massey farm at Campbell in Searcy County. Then we have another piece of wagon hub to your left. Also, the wagon thimble in the middle, and then a horseshoe and a metal ring on the hub. The next piece is a piece of wood from a ceiling rafter in a house near the Battle of Prairie Grove, Arkansas. The house was used as a Confederate hospital during the battle. All this was donated by Jeff Massey. These are pieces of a pot-bellied stove and cookware that were found at Klepper's Sawmill southeast of Harrison. The Confederates were overrun by the Yankees in the early morning hours, and they didn't have time to get all the cookware and provisions together. So these were the remnants, plus some horseshoes were also found. Here are mini balls fired from rifles. The other is a grape shot ball, which were fired from a cannon. And in the back is a piece that was a fragment from a cannonball. A gunpowder horn, which would have been used by Dr. Morris. This is a Harper's Ferry musket. It's a model 1854, which would have been used during the war between the states. And this is a bayonet given by Garvin Fitton, which was given to him by a fella from Newton County. And then we have another bayonet here that was found under a corn crib at Quail Valley in Boone County. You will notice the grape shot. Here were found in a clay bank near Leslie, Arkansas. And with that size, there had to have been probably 100 or so that would have been in the cannonball that was fired out. Kind of like a big shotgun effect. These are 54 and 58 caliber bullets, and they were found in Boone County by Steve Burgess. And there are also smaller size caliber bullets there too. Interesting enough, this is a parole certificate of a Confederate named John James Mars, and it's dated June 8, 1865. The Confederates would sign their parole and they would take it back home. Post-war, the Confederates were limited by the Yankees during Reconstruction in their movements and their activities. The former Confederates had to show their parole papers, and hopefully they would let you go. The Yankees would let you go, but not always. If you didn't have your parole papers while the Yankees came around, they could pretty much do what they wanted to do with you, legal or otherwise. Reconstruction was a terrible time on the Southern people, as they were under the control of the federal government and also limited all facets of their lives from 1865 all the way up to 1877. There's a little book called Confederate Catechisms, and it just tells facts about the war between the states. There's some song books from the war between the states. Now, this book was written by J. Troy Massey about Captain J.M. Bailey, a Confederate who lived in Boone County. The book tells of life in Boone County, of course it was then Carroll County, at the start of the war in 1861, through all 4 years of that conflict. Bailey wrote his book in later years in Texas, and he wrote it for his grandchildren. There are reunion booklets from the 1911 Confederate reunion held in Little Rock, Arkansas. A camp was named the Colonel Shaver Camp. Shaver has great-great-nephews. They are members of the Military Order of the Stars and Bars. We see a program, it's a memorial program actually, in 1907 honoring General Robert E. Lee on his birthday. His birthday was on January the 19th. And then here we see the Manual of Social Business Forms, which is a list of the war between the states and the battles. This picture is a great picture of the old Confederate veterans that was taken down at the courthouse here in Harrison in 1914. The war between the states timeline, as you can see, starts in November of 1860 and it ends in May of 1865. This timeline of the war between the states in Boone, Carroll, and surrounding counties. The background image on the timeline happens to be a picture of a 1910 Gaither Cemetery gathering of Confederate and Union veterans who met years after the war as friends again and in peace. On the wall above the war between the states timeline are pictures of Kurtz and Allison of the battles of Oak Hills, that's Wilson's Creek by the way, Missouri, and Elkhorn Tavern, which would be Pea Ridge, Arkansas. Next is pottery and cookware from the skirmish at Klepper's Mill, and that's in Boone County. Here is another Confederate reunion picture, and a Confederate reunion at Belfont around 1912 or 1914, somewhere around there. This is a Confederate Cross of Honor and is from Samuel Jackson Wilson's grave. Here we see a picture of Captain J.M. Bailey, and it was around 1930. Now, the Confederate flag that was given to Garvin Fitton's grandmother, Josephine Wright Crump, is made with Captain Bailey's sister, Melinda Jane, who married Captain John Rawson. This is a reproduction flag which says, "Go and the Lord be with you," or with thee. Go and the Lord be with thee. Thank you so much for giving us the time to share with you one of our most significant rooms is the war between the states.